land of enchantment.
It's Friday.
The land of EWTN, all across the Lone Star State.
It's GRN Alive.
Bringing you faith, fun, and facts.
Live from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
Join us on the show. Call
877-757-9424.
877-757-9424.
And good morning and welcome to GRN Alive here on the Guadalupe Radio Network, Friday edition. Glad you are with us. A lot going on in the world, and we have a lot to discuss today. It's May 29th, 2020, Friday, 7th week of Easter. Easter is coming to an end, and we will talk about Pentecost today and all the great celebrations that we're going to have this weekend. My name is Dave Palmer. Dr. Chris Malloy joins me as usual in the studio. Good morning, Dr. Malloy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well.
All right. Cecil Anderson having a special day today, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Good morning, Cecil.
Good morning.
All right. Diane Xavier managing our social media platforms today. So please go check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. The handle for all three of those is GRN Online if you want to see how things are looking behind the scenes. Just a couple of quick things, GRN related. A week from this coming Tuesday will be June 9th, and that is the beginning of the Guadalupe Radio Network Summer Share-a-thon with a theme of celebrating 20 years. And if that theme seems familiar, it was the same theme that we had in the spring. But we're still celebrating 20 years.
It's true.
The year is a whole year.
Exactly. Lots to celebrate.
And there's an awesome CD that we gave away in the spring that tells the history of Guadalupe Radio Network, and it's really amazing. I definitely hope you can get your hands on that. And so we do ask you to listen that week. It's going to be the 9th through the 12th. 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, the 9th through the 12th. Counting on my fingers here. And just we need your support. This is how we keep Catholic radio on the air. So, and also, do not forget to check out the new and improved Guadalupe Radio Network website, grnonline.com. And don't forget to allow it to know your location if you want to zip straight to your local station. And Joe has just done a fabulous job on it. It's a beautiful website, so by all means, go check it out. All right, Sunday is Pentecost, the birthday of the church, right?
Can't believe it.
Yeah, amazing.
All of Easter, we've been COVIDed.
Yeah.
COVIDed, a new verb.
Is that a new verb?
I guess it is.
We've been COVIDed.
It's true. Yeah.
It just feels weird.
Yeah, it's been everything's weird.
We're basically halfway through the year.
Everything's strange, and also speaking of birthdays, did you know? You may not know this, Dr. Malloy. Today is Cecil's birthday.
Oh, wow! Well, we're not going to sing, are we?
Oh yeah, we are not.
I think you were nominated to lead, Dr. Malloy.
And
that's awesome.
I got to say, Cecil emailed me last night and said, "Do you mind if Tova and Willem, that's her sister and her brother, come in and?" They wanted to come in and be with her today and spend the whole day with her at work. And I said, of course not. I mean, gosh, and I just find that so touching.
That's
awesome. I was saying if Cecil had a show on at noon, that'd be great. But they wake up at probably 5 o'clock to get here and spend time with her. So
yeah,
they're here
I know.
With her.
They volunteer before they realize what time they needed to get up.
What time is that show again? And so they're here with her,
yes.
And we welcome them into the control room, and how awesome that is. And Cecil's at that age where it's kind of a great age. Nobody's embarrassed to being 22, right?
No, definitely not. I mean, I sometimes feel like a baby, but other than that, no.
Yeah. So I was kind of hoping that we get past this whole COVIDness, as Dr. Malloy talks about, but what's going to knock it off the front page of the newspaper, so to speak. And unfortunately, it's all the craziness that's going on. So Cecil's going to tell us more about that. But later in the show, we have a guest who I'm familiar with because I saw a video series on him on, of all things, the Holy Spirit and Pentecost. So I know he's a spirit-filled gentleman. His name is Dr. Tom Curran. He hosts a program called Sound Insights on Sacred Heart Radio in Seattle, Washington. And you, Dr. Malloy, are the one that said, hey, let's consider him to talk about the Benedict Option. And so tell us about that.
Yeah, so so Tom and I went to grad school together at Catholic University from 92 on. And then I just spoke with him about 2 weeks ago. We've been in touch since graduation. But it's been a while before that. And he said that he uprooted his family from Seattle to go to Eastern Washington/Idaho. Mm-hmm. And that's what he's going to be talking about. Why? Because to give the context, Tom is a relentlessly positive guy, as he will say, and it's absolutely true. Always got a smile, always affirming what's going on in the world, finding the good where he can and affirming it, as St. Paul says. And yet he said, and this is our teaser here, he said, I think now it's time to move from a legitimate stance of affirmation of the world to prophetic, you could say denunciation, prophetic witness, where there's a distancing. And it's the same love of the world, but in a different modality.
Yeah.
And he thinks it's time to pivot to that. He has uprooted his family to do that, and we'll ask him why he's done that.
Do you think it's kind of like if you have a toxic friendship and you say, I still love you, but I got to spend some time away from you? Is that a good comparison? Or
I need to think about that. In a way, you know what I think it is? A little bit like that, but it's as though our routines, if you want to put it this way, if the orientation is to get back to the friendship, yes. Because what we need to do is create new patterns of living and new cultural activities.
Yeah.
And we sometimes we have to do that away from the big city, just like St. Benedict did.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to do it within the city.
And it's not a capitulation. It's not. It's a retreat, but it's also kind of a reloading in a sense.
That's right.
And so he can explain it. It's all based on The Benedict Option by Rod Dreher, a book I have not read personally, but I watched an interview. I listened to an interview with Dr. Tom Curran on his own radio show when he interviewed some guests on it. And I know he's a big fan of that book. And of course, can't really talk about what he's doing without that book. And so we'll discuss that as well. That's coming up. So Dr. Tom Curran, maybe sometimes you just think like, I don't think I can raise kids in this culture. I mean, my wife and I have had that conversation many times. Dr. Curran and his wife have 9 kids, right? And so they have, like you say, they've picked up and they've moved into a community, I guess, of like-minded Catholics.
That's right.
All right, so we'd love to have your thoughts as well. Have you heard of the Benedict Option? Maybe some of you are living the Benedict Option, all based on Benedict of Nursia and his religious community many, many centuries ago. 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. And as I mentioned, I was hoping that something would knock COVID off the front page of the newspaper, but I didn't want it to be what's going on right now.
Thinking.
So Cecil's got some of the top news, and of course, it's all pretty much based Minneapolis, right?
Minneapolis. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same thing. You wanted COVID to not be the headline, but this is not what we wanted either. So probably, as many of you have heard, this past week in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on Monday, police responded to a call from a shopkeeper about someone potentially trying to pass a counterfeit bill and arrested a 46-year-old man named George Floyd. And in that process, they ended up having him on the ground and kneeling on his neck for 7 minutes. And he said he couldn't breathe, and he eventually became limp and unresponsive. Took him to the hospital, and he was pronounced dead. And this was all caught on many cameras, and so it was a pretty horrific thing that happened. And since then, there's been a huge outcry and protest against this, which has resulted mainly in Minneapolis, but across the country there have been protests, and the ones in Minneapolis especially have turned into riots that have become quite looting, quite deadly themselves. People have died under these circumstances as well. Targets and other stores have been looted, broken into. There are fires, I think somewhere around 30 fires in the past 3 days. And most recently, late last night, the 3rd precinct of the police department there in Minneapolis was set to fire as well. And it's just become a huge, horrible thing. And the National Guard is now there. 500 soldiers from the National Guard are now there to assist with the Minneapolis Police Department to keep things under control. It's just horrible. And obviously, you understand the anger, obviously, because this man died and he did not need to die and stuff like that. But then, of course, causing riots and looting and danger to other people is also not a good thing. But yeah, I was
listening to Morning Glory this morning, and Gloria Purvis and Monsignor Charles Pope were having a discussion about this, and they kind of came from different perspectives. Gloria Purvis had given a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., where he said, in essence, riots are the voice of the unheard.
Right.
Okay, when people don't feel like they're being heard, then they turn to riots.
Right.
Monsignor Charles Pope said, riots are understandable but never acceptable.
Right.
And I think
they're both true.
They're both true. Yeah. Monsignor Charles also said something along the lines of, it's righteous anger, but not all righteous anger actions are good.
Yeah. And even the brother of the man who was killed, George Floyd, and I think everybody's seen this video. It's pretty
it's
atrocious.
horrible.
I mean,
It's
I don't know
horrible.
that anybody could just on the surface of it, just looking at that. Of course, you always say, well, what's but he even compared it to a child, the reaction to a child throwing a temper tantrum.
Right.
That when the child gets frustrated, they lash out. And I think most of us, we've seen this with our
Right,
kids sometimes.
right.
But we're not supposed to act childish.
Right.
And what does Target have to do with the killing of George Floyd? What do the pawn shop?
Yeah.
And
Deacon Harold brought up also, like, they're destroying their own community, and that's not good, too. Yeah, there's a lot of innocent bystanders in the midst of this. Yes, I think there should have been, like, a protest, a march of some sort, like, to, bring awareness, because they were upset, and understandably so, people are upset. But, yeah, of course, turning into what it's turned into is not good either.
So what we lack is a Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Who can lead this kind of
Right.
energy in a productive and fruitful way.
Yeah. And he was very effective through nonviolent means. Gandhi the same way, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes change takes time, and I think maybe there's a certain impatience that
Sure.
the change has got to happen very quickly. So we're gonna, and I think ultimately it's not effective because I think it turns a lot of people against
Right.
even President Trump in his own gentle manner of tweeting said these thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I
yeah.
won't let it happen. Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and told him that the military is with him all the way, any difficulty, and we will assume control, but when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you. That's from President Trump, and of course Twitter didn't ban that, but they kind of hit it. And that's a whole other topic about President Trump's executive order on the social media companies. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dr. Malloy, what were you saying?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is it's there are people who have an interest in fomenting this kind of rioting.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
let's be very
absolutely.
clear about
Absolutely.
that. And part of these are the people who are, trying to turn the tourniquet even tighter, squeeze the turnip, whatever you want to look at the COVID reaction tighter, and not because they're worried about a pandemic, but because they're interested in creating social disorder and creating a new order in their image.
Yeah, I don't think all these protests started out with the idea of become a riot. I think it kind of gets a mentality as it grows and more people get involved.
There's two things going on. There's the individuals acting on
Right.
the individual, but there are also those who coordinate and promote these kinds of things. It happened back in riots in L.A. 20, 30 years ago, et cetera. It's unfortunate.
If you have a thought about it, dear listener, call us up. We've got until about 25 after before Dr. Kern will join us. It's a somber day for many reasons, and I think the bottom line is a man died here. He died violently, and we need to pray for his soul. We need to pray for his family that's mourning, and the entire state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis, the Twin Cities there. 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. I thought there was a provocative tweet by Abby Johnson, who was a guest this time last week, and she said in her tweet, what if George Floyd's death wasn't about racism? What if it was just about sheer incompetence? I'm not saying it's not about racism. I'm just asking, what if it's not? Are we able to separate the two anymore?
That's a
Right.
good question.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Because I think there's an assumption that's unfair that, and again, I think she's right. It was absolutely incompetence.
Oh.
Yeah.
But we don't know 100% that it was about racism.
Yeah.
No, yeah, because several of the police officers that were involved in that had quite a few complaints made to them on brutality before this happened, and we don't know what those involved. Was it always with a black person? You know what I mean? We don't know that. For sure.
Yeah. The other thing that kind of intersects with this is the President Trump signing an executive order targeting social media. And it says President Trump signed an executive order on Thursday seeking to limit the broad legal protection that federal law currently provides to social media and other online platforms, a move that is expected to draw immediate court challenges. The order seeks to make it easier for federal regulators to hold companies like Twitter and Facebook liable if they are deemed to be unfairly curbing user speech, for example, suspending their accounts or deleting their posts. And I think there has been some evidence. Lila Rose has complained about this, about more on the conservative side being deleted or censored.
Pro-life things
And
constantly
I
getting
think
taken
there's
down.
definitely some smoke there.
Yeah, I've got a friend who during the votes in Ireland. Was it 2-3 years ago?
Yeah.
She was posting on it, and her account was deleted.
Yeah.
Oh my
And all
gosh.
she was doing was giving factual information
Yeah.
through Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all noticed recently, but sometimes on Facebook, you'll get a post and it'll say, this may not be factually correct.
Yeah.
And won't let, you have to go into it to let you see it,
Right.
which is
Well,
interesting. And you're wondering who's deciding what is factually correct and incorrect. You know
Yeah.
what I
You're
mean?
taking
Right.
you're taken to the fact check thing.
Yeah, and
Is that what
is it
you're-
only political facts, or if I say there are, I put a tweet out and say there are 9 continents in the world, that's factually
Right.
incorrect.
Well, that
are
gets
they gonna
censored,
go on
yeah.
and say take that off?
I
That's
doubt
not-
it. I doubt
Is
it.
is it only when the facts are? I teach. I have a YouTube channel and I teach the Summa, St. Thomas Aquinas. And when we got to the part of the Summa about unnatural pleasures, unnatural vices, and he clearly says that homosexuality is an unnatural vice in the Summa. And I was like, if I say this on social media, and all I'm doing is saying what Aquinas says, are they going to take down my account? You
Right.
shouldn't have that worry,
It's a good question.
And that's and so you're just like, I gotta play by the social media police. So I think that's what he's getting at.
What we really need is to form critical minds in reading this stuff, because there's a wealth of claims out there. I'm not going to say data, but there's a wealth of claims out there, Wikipedia, etc. We need to, as readers, we need to be critically alert. For instance, you want to buy a product, you look at the reviews,
Yeah.
and you have to critically evaluate. This guy's just out to lunch with his criticism or with his enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I mean, just when I remember back in college when I was writing essays and stuff like that, you have a certain criteria when you're using a source.
Yes.
Figuring out, is it relevant? Is it recent? Is it, they're all, who is saying it? Where is it coming from? What credibility do they have?
Yeah.
Which seems to be forgotten. You see something on social media, one of those 5-minute read, articles,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh yeah, this is truth, and post about it,
Right,
but
right. I mean, if there was some objective person that could look at all things
No one's objective, though.
just objectively and say this is not true, but I guess the thing is, I talked about Lila Rose complaining about being censored. Candace Owens, who is an African American conservative, very outspoken, provocative lady, she has actually filed suit against Facebook and has now claimed she's going to do the same thing with Twitter. I'd like to know, is there anybody on the left who is also complaining about censorship?
That's
I
a
think
good
that would be the
question.
proof. Is there anybody on the left saying, "Oh my goodness, I got censored again by Twitter"? Is that happening? I don't know that it is, and I don't know that it
That's a
isn't,
good
but my
question.
guess
That's a
would
good
be that it's
question.
not.
very good
know.
question.
Certainly doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
I haven't heard
Yeah.
much complaint on that side.
Yeah,
Right.
but and there was a CNN.
Maybe if it's left-wing communist Satanists.
Maybe.
maybe they're on hard
I'm
times.
sure there is such a group. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure.
There was I mean, censorship is a bad thing, generally speaking. There
Right.
was a crew from CNN. If you go and you see on the CNN page that the guy was out there doing a stand-up, report from Minneapolis, and the state police came and arrested him during his live report. And on the surface of it, you say, gosh, you shouldn't be arresting reporters. But I think he had also crossed police lines. And so I think he was asking. I don't know. I shouldn't even judge because, this was sometimes, the media can't just do whatever they want.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other discussion about how
yeah.
far you can go and are there rules on media? I mean, yeah, journalism's interesting.
The interesting thing is, even as of a couple of days ago, all the topics that we were planning on talking about during this segment
Have
were
changed. Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
And we had, Father McGivney, and we had things. I think one of the big stories that we ought to talk about, and I
Yeah.
think, Dr. Muller, you've done a little bit of digging on this, is what happened in the Maryland County, where they said that there's no food and drinks in religious services.
No consumption of either liquid or solid foods allowed during religious worship.
Howard
Right, and
County,
that-
Maryland.
And
yeah.
this would mean that the Catholic priest, right? Because you can have a valid mass with where the congregation does not receive, but the priest, for the mass to be valid for him, the priest has to consume.
Yeah.
Do you know
Right.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he in fact, he has to consume the host and the consecrated wine that was effected there at that particular mass, right? So he has to consume the main host, not the host that might be left over in the tabernacle. So that would mean that the Catholic Mass couldn't take place.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, I got to interject.
And they reversed it very quickly.
They did.
Yeah.
I'm glad they did.
Yeah.
Now because do you know the sacred liberty of the church? I've spoken about this before. Sacred liberty of the church, that there is no human authority that can tell the Catholic Church how to be church.
Mm-hmm.
So if a human authority says you cannot consume in your sacred worship, the Catholic Church looks at that as null and void.
Yeah.
That law has no standing.
Yeah.
Now, they can take the priest and put him in jail,
Yeah.
of course, because they got guns. But it has no standing before the truth, before
Mhm.
God. The law, that law is null and void.
Mm.
We keep talking about civil liberty.
Yeah.
Religious liberty for the Catholic Church goes deeper than civil liberty, and it's because Jesus Christ is king, and he instituted the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So there's the Catholic Church has not only a civil liberty,
Mm-hmm.
which in that respect is sort of, in our country is equal with other religions, but also has a sacred liberty.
Yeah. And it just it makes me think, because when the Minnesota, it was Minnesota, right? The governor's there, speaking of Minnesota, who
Yes.
came out and said, we're
Oh,
going to
yeah,
go ahead
we're
and
not-
open up the churches,
yeah, the bishops were like,
despite
no.
the governor's, and the governor immediately changed course.
It was not only the Catholics, but also the Lutherans and I think the Baptists.
And in this case, I think there was some outcry. And what did they do? Within like a day or so, it's almost as soon as that story came out from Howard County in Maryland, they reversed it.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if maybe there was a little bit more of a stink about
An outcry,
the-
yeah.
Maybe our bishops, it's time for them to get bold.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah,
and
it
really-
seems to work.
Yeah. I mean, they have clout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember when it was the hospitals? Like, we're going to close if you mandate that we do contraceptive covering.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, if you're a governor or a health administrator, you got to quake in your boots. We have a lot of hospitals.
Yeah.
The bishops have a lot of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, despite what the culture sometimes, thinks about Catholics and stuff like that, yeah, I do believe the Catholic Church holds still weight in, what people think of, they
Yeah.
they could have said something and could have.
We just
Yeah.
have to be bold disciples of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. And not be afraid.
Not be
I think
afraid.
well, like Monsignor Pope, I keep quoting Monsignor Pope when I did the interview. He said there's a diabolical fear that
Yes.
has taken over the world, and I see it all the time. People, you see it in the faces at the store. You walk around and nobody wants to look at each other, and they're all covered up, and everybody's. People are afraid of each other.
No, there was a director of EWTN who got COVID, and he said the
Yeah.
exact same thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Dan
Yeah,
Burke.
Dan Burke.
Yeah, Dan Burke.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, he experienced the very
Oh,
illness
yeah.
itself as something, like a spiritual component to it.
Yeah. I have a comment that just came in through text, but we want to mention about Father McGivney.
yeah,
And
definitely.
this is big news
It
that
is.
kind of gets pushed
It
off
is.
each one. But
It is.
Sister, what's that
Sure,
all
yeah.
about?
Father Michael McGivney, who is the founder of the Knights of Columbus, is going to be beatified soon. They don't have a date yet, but Pope Francis approved a miracle that happened in association with him, so he's going to be beatified. So-
Yeah.
and it's going to happen in Connecticut, according to the Knights.
Yeah.
That's
so all
awesome.
Knights should be celebrating. This is awesome news.
Yeah, and a little side trivia here. McGivney was serving as a priest in Connecticut amid a pandemic of
Yes,
89-90,
that's
according
so
to press
cool.
release. And I also have a
They
interesting little...
think that might have been a coronavirus pandemic.
It was related to
That's the
least
one,
it's-
really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And a little trivia here. If he is in fact canonized, will Father McGivney be the first Knight of Columbus ever to be canonized?
False.
Ooh, yeah,
oh,
no.
wow.
Ah.
You didn't even need a lifeline
The
there.
Cristeros!
That's exactly wow.
Vivo Cristo Rey!
Oh.
Yes, a group of 6, not that I
wonderful.
have to tell Dr. Malloy because you apparently know this.
Viva, sorry.
A group of 6 Mexican members of the organization were martyred during the Cristero War of 26 to 29 and its aftermath. So, wow, I didn't know that until I did a little research. That's interesting.
Awesome.
So
All right.
cool.
And here's a little non-controversial point, and this was actually sent to me. I'm not sure who sent me this, but this person said, please just make this announcement, and we won't have a lot of time to discuss it, but apparently United States President of the Catholic Medical Association says hand communion is more infectious than communion on the tongue. Have you heard this?
No, I have
yeah,
not.
So
That was what they were said early on in the COVID thing. Is they
Yeah.
said that it was that was studies that came out, right?
Oh, there was one. That's right. That the hand has more germs than the
Yeah,
mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember hearing that 20 years ago, where a priest friend of mine who wasn't, he wasn't a conservative or anything, but he just said, there's many more germs on the hand. Your hands are all
Yeah.
over
Yeah,
the
right.
place.
Yeah, right.
And the priest is going to touch. He's going to touch your hand.
Yeah.
My parish still has reception on the tongue exclusively. I don't know if somebody comes up and just says, I need to have it on the hand. I guess they can, but
Right.
our ordinary form still throughout this whole thing since it's been reopened has been on the tongue.
I appreciate that. We've been driving out there, too.
Yeah. All right. I think it's time to take a
Yeah,
break and
it's
get to Dr. Tom Curran. I'm excited about this. And, dear listener, we want your feedback on this. Have you heard of the Benedict Option? It's a book that was written by Rod Dreher talking about basically, well, that Dr. Curran explained it, and also Dr. Malloy. This was his idea, so the weight of this interview is on your capable hands,
boys.
Dr. Malloy. Just kind of, I don't want to say escape. The first word that comes to my mind, it's not an escapism, but it's a retreat. It's getting away from the world, if only temporarily, to kind of form a family so that we can be better apostles and evangelists. Would that be right? We'll ask him when he gets on.
It could be flight or it could be fight.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. We have Dr. Curran on Comrex, right? Okay, and he's a radio host, and so he's really he's really an interesting guy. So we'll talk to him in a moment. Also, a little bit about Pentecost at the beginning. 877-757-9424 is the phone number. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll be right back on GRN Alive.
While listening to your favorite Guadalupe Radio Network radio station, have you ever stopped to say to yourself, oh, if I could only hear that again? Well, the good news is you can. Just log on to grnonline.com. We have links to podcast versions of our programming. Again, grnonline.com. Make sure to enable the location service when you're prompted. It will deliver your local station information, plus connect you to all the network stuff as well. grnonline.com.
Solidarity Health Share is rebuilding Catholic healthcare in America. We conform to the moral guidelines of the Catholic Church so that you never have to worry about your healthcare dollars paying for anything that violates your conscience. From conception to natural death, we strive to serve all healthcare needs, protect human life, celebrate families, and promote the dignity of all people. Join Solidarity Health Share in restoring and rebuilding authentic Catholic healthcare by signing up at solidarityhealthshare.org, a sponsor of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
In 2 weeks, we will be interrupting our regular programming schedule for a quarterly share-a-thon to keep your GRN station on the air. Why do we come to our listening family to seek financial gifts? The Guadalupe Radio Network spends approximately $4.5 million per year to operate all 37 stations in the network, or about $515 per hour. We are 100% listener-supported, completely dependent on the divine providence of God, working through the generosity of our GRN family of listeners. We are so thankful that you are part of the GRN family. I want to personally thank you for your continued prayerful and financial support since the year 2000, when the GRN first started in Catholic radio. This is Len Oswald, president of the Guadalupe Radio Network, with your GRN Family Minute. We are your Catholic radio. Radio for your soul.
We're back, and this is GRN Alive Friday edition. It's 28 minutes after the hour, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. And as promised, our host for the remainder of this hour of this program is Dr. Tom Curran, and he is a speaker, author, podcast, radio host. He hosts the program on the Sacred Heart Radio Network called Sound Insight, and he has given over 1,800 presentations to more than 350,000 people in 35 states and 6 countries. He specializes in a whole lot of topics, and he's also the author of several books. He received a PhD in systematic theology from Catholic University of America in Washington, where I think he met the wonderful Dr. Malloy. And most importantly, he and his wife, Carrie, have 9 children, and he joins us on the program now. Dr. Curran, do you like to be called Dr. Curran, Tom, or how should we address you? Good morning.
Good morning, Dave. Dr. T is fine.
Dr. T, not Mr. T, right?
Please call me Tom, Dave.
Okay. And I know, Dr. Malloy, and you and Dr. T.
We go way back.
Yeah.
Was it 92 or 93? I think it was 92. We met in 92.
We met in 92. We were both arriving at Catholic University to start the doctoral program.
We met on the day of the soft shell, it's a hard shell crab bake, I think. And
that day, huh?
Tom started a prayer group, and I had no idea about this charismatic renewal, and four of us guys are sitting around. We're going to do prayer, fellowship, and service, right? And we begin with the prayer, and then it started getting kind of charismatic, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been a lot of fun with Tom, and I have to say, two teasers here. Two witnesses to Tom's brightness. One, his sister. I'm up in Boston visiting him, and his sister goes, Mom, Tom was out doing an errand, and I'm in the house, I don't know, reading a book or something. And his sister goes, yeah, but Mom, Tom's the smartest man in the universe.
Finally, someone realizes what has walked into the room.
There we go.
Yes. Oh, I'll come on every week, Chris. You're going to talk like that.
Yeah,
that
guys.
sweet.
Smartest man in the universe. Wow. And we've got him as a guest on the program. And then was there one other anecdote?
Yes, one of the guys in the fellowship said the same thing.
Oh, okay. Well,
there we go.
Do we have
two witnesses?
What am I
That's
even
biblical.
doing here? I think I should. How much am I getting paid for this interview?
And and I got to say, when Dr. Malloy emailed me and said, "Hey, we ought to have Dr. Curran," and the name, I was like, "I know this guy. And then I remembered that my wife, who is very charismatic herself and used to live in a charismatic community in Holland, she had introduced me to a video series that you did on the Holy Spirit. I think it was "Come Holy Spirit, Gift of Grace, Fire from Above." So I just want to ask you, because we are a couple of days before Pentecost, if you could just spend a couple of minutes talking about Pentecost. Then we're going to get into the real topic that we're going to talk about, the Benedict Option. But since you are kind of a Holy Spirit Pentecost expert, in addition to the brightest man in the universe, could you talk about that for a second, Tom?
Oh, for sure. Thank you, Dave. Well, Pentecost, it's referred to as the birthday of the church, really, because there's no way that we'll be able to accomplish the mission which is ours, right, to be salt, light, and leaven in the world, to proclaim Jesus Christ without the power that comes from God. Jesus said, you will be my witnesses throughout the ends of the earth, but only when the Holy Spirit comes. So we're in a time right now of expectant waiting, of vigiling in prayer, of turning to the Lord and crying out and saying, please come, Holy Spirit. And for us Catholics, even right now, we share in that event of Pentecost, that moment of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit when we were confirmed. That's what the Catechism of the Catholic Church says in paragraph 1302. It says that the celebration of confirmation is, as it were, our sharing, our, if you will, personal Pentecost, our sharing in that event. And so we can be praying even now for a deeper yielding to and unleashing of that gift of the Holy Spirit. Otherwise, we will not have what we need. I heard Dr. Malloy, Christopher, talking about we need to up our game. Man, we need to be courageous. We need to stand up and be salt, light, and leaven in this world. And the reality is we will not without the power that comes from God.
Awesome. Which leads us really nicely into the main topic of really responding to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, and that is the Benedict Option. And Dr. Malloy, you're the one that said, hey, I love this topic. Let's talk about it. So why did this interest you?
Well, Tom and I spoke 2 weeks ago, and we go way back to 92. And I've always remembered Tom as, and you still are this way, Tom, obviously, and you'll be this way till you die, but not in heaven. At any rate, positive, affirming. And St. Paul talks about whatever is true, whatever is good, affirm it.
Yeah.
Hold fast to it. Don't condemn it. And so Tom is always that way, and you still are that way. And yet you said, Tom, that there were some scales that fell from your eyes 2 years ago. Can you tell us about this and what this has to do with, Rod? It's not all about Rod Dreher's book, but it kind of signals something, that phrase, the Benedict Option, which can be lived in many ways. Could you tell us about how you've lived it and what you think this tells us? What do you think our culture requires us as Catholics, or at least some of us as Catholics, to do now?
Sure. So Chris, 2 years ago, with the McCarrick scandal unfolding before our eyes, we all know about the Summer of Shame. I was like, wow, this is shocking. This is tragic. But thank God it's happening, because now finally we'll get the unveiling, the unmasking of this corruption. We'll have serious efforts of purifying the church, of reforming the priesthood, and of bringing healing to the victims. And I was waiting and saying, yes, and I'm ready, let's go. And there was crickets, just sadly, sickly, tragically. And then Archbishop Vigano released several letters over the course of the fall. And I was like, finally, now something's going to happen. And nothing, almost nothing happened regarding what I would have called to be an appropriate response to the seriousness of what was revealed in that moment. And so as that happened, I began to look around and pay more attention to, wait a minute, what's going on in the church? Why are our church leaders being so passive, cowardly, even complicit or corrupt? Where is the outrage? And then I started looking around and I'm like, wait a minute, we have all of this Pew Research and Cara research that's showing us that we're living on a demographic Titanic. The church is just bleeding out members, especially the young generation. And I'm like, why is that happening? It hit me in a whole new way that as I looked around, I realized that for the most part, our priests, our pastors, our bishops are not prophetically addressing the most critical issues of our time by bringing forth, very simply, what the church teaches in its fullness with conviction and courage. So issues around marriage, issues around sexuality, about the beginning of life, abortion, the end of life. So many issues gender ideology just coming over. And I realized that we were in a cultural tsunami. The culture of our time, frankly, was doing a far better job of evangelizing members of the church than we as the church were doing to evangelize the world. So I'll just pause there and just say that that was the initial setup of things. And what it led me to was a very simple thing. I have a call on earth. I've been blessed to be married to Kerry for 25 years. Christopher, you know Kerry well. We've been blessed with 9 children here on earth, many in heaven. And it's my call to become a saint and to help my wife and my kids to become saints, live their mission on earth, and get to heaven. And what I realized was this. If I simply kept doing what I was doing with Kerry to raise kids in our faith, that they would, more than likely, for the most part, just bleed out of the church like everybody else. And so I needed to do something different. Kerry and I needed to do something different. And it all happened over the course of one weekend, Divine Mercy Sunday last weekend, where we realized we have to make a radical change or we're going to end up with our kids bleeding out of the church, ending up not practicing their faith, and all the other impacts on their lives of not living that way.
Was this last year or this year?
This was a year ago in May, or in April, May, was when they had, when Divine Mercy Sunday was. And Kerry and I were actually leading a retreat for married couples in northern Idaho, and we met up with some common friends with someone else back here in the Seattle area, and they said, hey, come on over to this traditional Latin Mass parish, an FSSP parish, Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, and we did, and we went in, and Kerry started crying during the course of this high Mass. It was about an hour and 45 minutes long. It was a pontifical high Mass celebrating Divine Mercy Sunday, and the church was packed. Dave and Christopher, it was
with
packed.
Lots of old people, right, Tom?
Yeah. No, well, here's the thing. It was packed with people that looked like us. Now, when I say look like us, I mean this, that we walk into a church, right? We walk into a church. I've got 9 kids, 20 years old down to 7. We walk in, we're a spectacle. And what we don't see are other large families until we walked into this church. And then we saw a whole bunch of large Catholic families dressed appropriately, quiet, reverent, participating in their faith. And it was like, it was just stunning. And Kerry was like, these people believe that this is Jesus and that what's happening here is holy. And afterwards we went down to coffee and donuts, and meeting all of these families, it was this combination of weeping over the majesty of what was poured over us and grieving over, what have we been doing? Mm-hmm. Why didn't we know this was here? What have we been missing? And we began to, we literally driving home, we said, we have to move. We have to move to a place where we can not flee from the world. This is the thing. This isn't about fleeing from. This is about accomplishing the mission that is ours as a husband and a wife and a mother and a father. I need to do whatever I need to do to be able to be sure, to do the best that I can, to set up my kids to be able to live their faith in its fullness.
I just want to mention that Dr. Tom Curran is our guest. I want to give the phone number out. Last week we talked, what was it? Steve Ray was on a couple weeks ago, and afterwards I got an email from somebody who said, I totally disagree with what Steve Ray said. And I said, you know what? We gave the phone number out many, many times during the show. So we invite, whether you love what Dr. Curran is saying or you're thinking, oh, no, I think I've got a question or I want to, pose this challenge to him. We invite the questions in the comments. So please call us up, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. And anyways, so you talk about the problems and that you did kind of pick up and moved. Had you already read the Rod Dreher book? Did that come in advance? Where did the book and the Benedict Option come into all this?
Well, it's funny because that came in after the fact, right? So I think I had generally heard of it, but didn't know what it was about. And after we had made the move and had been living out what he describes there, we then discovered, let's read this book and let's talk about it on my radio program. So we did that a few months ago, and I'm like, hey, where's our chapter? This is real. And Dave, this is actually what's happening here in northern Idaho at St. Joan of Arc Parish. There are dozens and dozens of families moving in regularly. People will literally be driving by. I heard the story. This guy drove by with his wife. They were in an RV traveling around the country. They showed up. They were present at a mass. They said, we're not leaving. They bought land. They drove home. They sold their house and they moved. It is that spectacular. It is that startling when you can come into a place, and here's the word, guys, it's culture. It is when you can walk into a place that still has a rich sense of Catholic culture, meaning specifically that what's in the atmosphere, the spirit and ideals that are present in the room, that are unspoken but taken for granted and strived to be lived out and used as the norm for how we live, a Catholic culture is still possible today. But it will mean typically uprooting from situations, cultural and societal environments that are much more toxic to your kids, to the world in which you live. So this is really, it is fleeing, but only in the sense of what I would say, Joseph fled to Egypt with the Blessed Mother and the baby Jesus. He fled not to run away from a mission or a call, but in order to fulfill his call, to lead, provide, and protect the Holy Family. And that's what we're doing here. And I got to tell you, it is working in spades.
Your kids are liking it?
It's amazing. Our kids, did you guys hear on June 16th of last summer a great tremor and earthquake in the Seattle area? That was the screaming and the tearing of garments of my teenage daughters who are going to be uprooted from their friends.
I think I heard that, yeah.
You did. Did you hear about it? It was in the news somewhere.
Yes.
No, it was a horrific, no, we're never going to enjoy this, right? And here's the thing. You have to know this. Why would we do this? We had our kids at the best Catholic high school in the Archdiocese of Seattle. We literally moved to be near that school, to be invested in the community around that school, to be able to grow our kids in faith around other families.
Listen up. People who are in charge of Catholic schools, listen up, because a lot of people have this experience. Sorry, Tom.
No, absolutely, Christopher. So what happened was our kids were at this school, and all of a sudden we saw them being drained of faith. No, wait a minute. This is the best Catholic school in the best Catholic high school in the whole Archdiocese. Well, the reality is about half the kids aren't Catholic, and of the half that are Catholic, the majority of them are not going to Mass. Their families are not fervently, intentionally practicing their faith. So our kids were literally being evangelized by the world through their friends, especially through the portals of toxicity called social media platforms. Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. This stuff was pouring in filth right into the minds and hearts of our kids. Not that we weren't monitoring, managing, and having serious controls over the lifestyle and the access that our kids had, but any friends that they have that are not coming from a similar environment become this pure open door, a portal of filth pouring in and washing over and washing away, dislodging a whole Catholic mindset and replacing it with an evangelistic mindset that the world has, evangelizing my kids into gender ideology, gay marriage, abortion, and all of the other hot button issues. They're not just hot button issues. These fundamentally shape how you live our lives.
Yeah.
So our kids would come back from this school, from these friends, talking about stuff like, wait a minute, where'd you hear that? We don't believe that. We pray here as a family. We live our faith. We do retreats. We do all these activities together. And what ends up happening is our kids are like, why are we so extreme? I'm like, wait a minute. We are extreme? No. The families of the kids that you're hanging around with, they're given into the world. They've given into this society. They are heralds of a diabolic, disorienting way of living life. And it's like, you know what? We need to get our kids into relationship with other kids who are like us. And that's what's happened over here. And I'll tell you, they're more reverent. They go to a mass that's now an hour and a half to an hour 45 minutes long, and they're dressed reverently, modestly.
And they're not squirming.
They're not squirming. And here's the biggest thing that you can't even imagine. They hang around with other young men and women that are teenagers, and they are not sexualized relationships. They're not about dating. They're dressing modestly. They act reverently. Their vision of life is much more rooted in a freeing. You can flourish in your Catholic faith.
Tom, let me, if I may, voice what somebody a criticism of this. Somebody might say, in framing this criticism, I'll give an example of somebody I spoke to, and this person was at a parish that. Let's just say it wasn't a good parish. And I asked this person, I said, why do you stay at that parish? And his response was, Dave, if I leave, nobody is there. I can't give up the fight because, we've got a small group of people in our parish that are trying to make a change there. And so somebody might say, Tom, why are you abandoning this high school where your kids could make a difference? Or why are, again, what would you say to that criticism?
Dave, I'm talking to myself 3 years ago when I answer that question, because for 30 years I've done church ministry work. I've done work to help foster and develop a Catholic culture in parishes and strive to be someone who helps the Catholic Church be salt, light, and leaven in the world. For 30 years I did that, and the fruit of it wasn't working. And so what I realize is this: if your call is to stay on the front lines and watch the ship go down, God bless you. But my call first is to be a child of God who becomes a saint, helps my wife do the same, and together in our marriage raise our kids. And essentially what happened was that very sentiment I lived for decades. But when my kids became teenagers, I realized that the Catholic Church, parishes far and wide, are not doing what they need to do to foster a vital, vibrant Catholic faith and culture. And so my kids would be the wreckage. And I'm sorry, I do care about this local community, but my first concern, my first mission is towards my kids and helping them get to heaven. So it's literally the circles of concern became narrower and narrower until it came down to, I have to do what I need to do for my family.
Mm-hmm. If you look at this like a fire, when you light a fire, at the beginning it's the fragile stage. And it just seems to me like if you're lighting a fire out in the middle of there's no blocks for the wind, you try to light some twigs, and it's just you and a match. Mm-hmm. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
But if you get a little bit of shelter with community, you might be able to get a fire going, and then send them out 2 by 2.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom, there's a book I read a long time ago, and I forget the author now, but he talks about the adventure sporting family versus the consumer family. And I'm wondering if part of the reason why our culture, Catholic culture, is going down is that we're Catholics living in a consumer way. That is, we're passive. We watch Netflix. We let the culture tell us what to do, and it's the ideologues that have taken over the culture. But if you're going out to Eastern Washington, you have to be a sporting adventure. You're an active. You're creating culture. So again, I want to say I don't see it as flight. I see it as actually avant-garde.
Mm-hmm.
You're living the future, and yes, taking care of your family first. But you're also creating those bits of culture that are going to hopefully blaze up and be the future for this decaying society.
So, Christopher, I agree with you. And so that book, The Benedict Option, it does principally refer to Saint Benedict of Nursia, of course, the 6th century founder of Western monasticism. However, it does also refer to Pope Benedict and his insight that the future of Christianity, it could be a springtime, but only after passing through a winter. And that winter will mean a shedding of maybe a large portion of Catholic believers and the growing together of what he calls islands of believers that will live the faith more densely, more intentionally, more fervently and fully. And out of them will come the new springtime. And honestly, I have done this work for 30 years all over the country, even around the world. The church, it will continue to shed believers. It's not a question. And the reason is that we don't have priests who are willing to speak the fullness of the church's teaching with courage and conviction. They're not ready or willing to be prophetically reverent, to speak to these matters. So then the people that they're leading are not being formed in the faith. It's very casual. And to speak to your specific point, Christopher, I would say this, that we're unwilling to do the hard easy. We're not willing. We'd rather do the easy hard. Be comfortable now, be soft now, and then things get harder. And that's what's been happening. We have to be willing to do what's hard, and that is to stand up, be a voice, and we will do that much more easily when we have a community around us. That's your twigs analogy. We need other believers who can stand together, not hide, but we have to come out of the battle where we're being just savaged and just chewed up and beat up. Let's come away, let's be healed and strengthened, and then let's go back into battle from that place of strength.
Phone number here is 877-757-9424. Dr. Tom Curran is our guest, talking about his decision to move his family, 9 kids and his wife, out of the big city into a smaller community of like-minded Catholics. Following, he eventually did read the Rod Dreher book called The Benedict Option. Phone number 877-757-9424. 877-757-9424. I think one of the interesting things is, hope springs eternal in the human breast, and I think a lot of times folks like us are saying, if we just get that Supreme Court justice, everything's going to turn around. If we just overturn Roe v. Wade, if we just get the pro-life, president or this and that, it's almost like minor political victories are going to save the day. Do you see that trend, Tom?
Absolutely, Dave. I think about the way in which we will think, okay, hey, Tom, relax. Things aren't that bad, right? This was like often what we would get when we were talking about moving and the reasons why. Our friends were like, Tom, it's like a beautiful day out. We live in a peaceful neighborhood, and we're out on a sideline watching a sports game. What are you talking about? Toxic culture and demographic Titanic. Tom, relax. Just chill out a little bit. And I'm like, no, you have not experienced the devastation of losing kids to faith. Carrie and I looked around and said, our oldest daughter's 20. Let's take a look at our older nephews and nieces from our siblings. And so just understand, this is 2 Catholic families that have come together, and Carrie and me, and what happened to them. And what we saw was there were more children born outside of marriage than inside of marriage. Among our nephews and nieces, there were more divorces than marriages. There were all of my nephews and nieces lived together before marriage. And in fact, almost none of them are practicing their Catholic faith anymore.
And this is a family, Tom and Carrie put on their own wedding. All the food was made by awesome Italian from Carrie's side family. I couldn't believe it. You guys put on your own wedding, right, Tom? This is an amazing Catholic family, and Tom's is too.
Yeah. Hey, I want to have time to go to our caller, Sarah, calling in from Houston with a question for Dr. Tom Curran. Sarah, thanks for calling in. What's your question for Dr. T?
You're welcome. Good morning, everyone. I applaud you for your work. Here's my question. How does the layperson in the pews make a positive difference in the formation of priests? There's some good ones. They're mostly priests that are doing what you're mentioning, which is not preaching the fullness of truth. Thank you so much.
All right, Tom, what's your answer for Sarah? Thank you, Sarah, for calling.
That's a great point. So, Sarah, I love your point. And so, I'm going to say, first of all, is pray, and then also fast. And those things are not Those things are not small things. They are big things. God can do great work through that. The second would be this, that priests will often be open to those whom they'll consider authority. So I look at somebody like Father John Riccardo. He has a new initiative called Acts 29. And basically, Acts has 28 chapters, and so we are the 29th chapter. And it was an attempt to help reform parishes, but it quickly became an attempt to help minister to priests, to help them become healed, to help them become restored to the fullness of their call as priests, and then to be able to give them the equipping they need to be able to live community and be able to go forward and shepherd their people. So Acts 29 is an initiative that you might point him to. I would also, he has a new document out called Reimagining the Church. If you go to his website, Acts 29, Father John Riccardo, you can see a vision that he's painted there for priests. Guess what? Sort of living like a Benedict Option, living in community together, diocesan priests, and then investing more in being priests who lead, provide, and protect their people. So I would begin with those things, but priests are tough nuts to crack because they've gone through a lot of formation. They're used to being in charge, and honestly, one of the biggest challenges is priests don't want to get out of line.
Yeah.
Priests don't want to get out of line. They're afraid of being slapped down or being punished or being exiled if they step up and they stand out too much.
Yeah, and I guess in two ways, from up above and also from the congregation, like angry responses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tom, can I ask this question? How can a layperson go to a place like? What are the professional opportunities there?
And you got 30 seconds.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here it is. The professional opportunities come from God's providence. So many people, they have to discern well, but you know what? If you go and you attempt to fulfill what God is calling you to do and you do it wisely, God's going to provide in shocking ways.
Yeah, thanks so much. Hey, we hang out afterwards and do an after show. I don't know if you have any more time for us, Dr. Curran, or not. Are you going to hang around for a little bit? Do you got to go?
I might have to get going, maybe a few minutes.
Okay. Do you got another 10, 15 minutes, or do you got to go?
So I'll tell you what, I will check around. I'll check in for a few minutes, but I do want to invite folks to go to a Facebook page where I pray the Rosary live with people. I love my Catholic faith on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm going to do that live shortly after this program ends.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, very good. Well, thanks so much for being a guest in the program. We might have a few more minutes with Dr. Tom Curran after the program on our Facebook and YouTube and Twitter platforms. And we thank him for being on with us. Dr. Malloy, thanks so much. Sissel, happy birthday. Hope you have a great
Thank you.
into your 23rd year of life. Wow.
Oh, my goodness. That's scary.
Also, Diane always just does a great job on social media platforms. So thanks to her. And thanks for everybody who listened and called in. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock Central, for a replay of GRN Alive, and also Monday, 8 o'clock Central, with Joe and the team from Houston. God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend and a happy Pentecost.
Thank you for listening to GRN Alive.
From the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
For more faith, fun, and facts,
Join our email list.
just text the letters GRN to the number 42828. That's GRN to the number 42828.
And may your Friday be filled with the joy of the Lord.
Blessed be God, blessed be his holy name, blessed be Jesus Christ, true God and true man, blessed be the name of Jesus, blessed be his most sacred heart, blessed be his most precious blood. Blessed be Jesus in the most holy sacrament of the altar. Blessed be the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete.
All right. Okay, we are now on social media platforms. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening in on the show across the network on the radio. But I think we've got Dr. Tom Curran and Dr. Malloy for a couple of minutes, and then the doctors are going to leave the building, so to speak. And so,
The paradox.
Tom, are you still there? You still there, Tom? Okay, he may have left the building already. Okay, there we go. Tom, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right. No, I don't want to abuse your generosity of your time, but Dr. Malloy is going to stay here for a couple more minutes as well. Is there anything you want to kind of
Well,
tie
if he's
things
staying,
together?
then
Yeah.
I better stick around too. So.
Yeah.
Or the drinks.
This is where we can talk a little bit more informally, and I'll tell you what. Do you want to? We can talk.
I'm fine. I can take 15 minutes if you want.
Okay, great. Let's. You want to talk about Pentecost? More about Benedict Option? We kind of talked a lot about that.
Well, can we talk a little bit? Do you have farm animals? I mean, what are you doing, Tom? Eggs in the morning?
Okay, is this being recorded right now? So,
Yeah.
Well, we're on the social media platforms. Yes.
Okay, cool. So I didn't know when we were on. So hey, everyone. Okay, so we finally got our first dog. It's funny though, because coming out here in eastern Washington and northern Idaho, it's a different environment. There's a gas station, a mobile gas station down the street, and on the sign out front, it says, "You're welcome here. Jesus loves you."
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now just think about that, right? People here are friendly. People here are just nice and all this. Okay. It's not that people aren't nice in the Puget Sound, the greater Seattle area. But let me say this, that the cultural context is more friendly to faith, to those who practice faith, those who live their faith. And so I do think that we don't, but there are a number of folks, especially in northern Idaho, who are on farms, who actually sell everything, go buy some land, and they start farming to be self-sustaining. So there are people who have taken this to a very, very, very great, all-in kind of quality. But that's not a lot of people. A lot of people come here, they find jobs, or they bring their job with them, and especially in this, post-COVID or COVID-19 world, it's becoming more and more common and available for folks to work in a telecommuting way. And so that's going to open up more families to move here. That's what's happening. It is happening, and more people are happening as they wake up to the call they have to rescue their kids from a toxic swamp and to be able to foster in them a really full, vibrant faith.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to somebody recently after Mass, and he's talking about poetic knowledge. I don't know if y'all have heard that term. It was actually Paul Check, who's, his son, Chris Check, runs Catholic Answers. And the Paul and Diane Check go to my parish, and he's talking about, because my son was climbing a tree after Mass, and he said, this is how kids learn even before they start reading books, is they learn by using their hands and catching bugs and lifting rocks and being in nature. And I think there's not enough of that these days. You see more commonly kids with their nose in iPads and iPhones, and it's sad to see.
John Sr. talks about that. Right? In his books, that it's the gymnastic moment where you just need to, stretch your body, climb, get into dangerous, places.
Yeah. And rather than reading about a bug on the internet,
actually
going and catching one and looking at it and touching it. And that's how I spent my childhood.
Well, my son catches Texas spinies and puts them in a glass cage. After 4 weeks, they get kind of skinny, and we put them back out in a while.
Any thought on that, Tom?
Yeah, you know what? It's like when I hear that sort of back to nature, I would consider that a wonderful overflow or fruit, and some access that more than others. But I would say that there is a reframing of just how kids end up wanting to spend their time. There's less draw to video games and being on screens, and there's just more of a draw to healthy, clean fun. Let's go hang out at a park together and just walk around and have nice conversation, kick around a soccer ball, play some ultimate frisbee. Yeah, let's go hike in the woods or go fishing or go camping, stuff like that. That stuff just happens very ordinarily. Not so much the camping, but that stuff happens just really ordinarily around here where, again, you have to understand, I have 5 teenagers. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say this out loud. If you have folks on right now and you don't have teenagers yet, you're probably not going to get it. You don't get it until your kids are teenagers and they begin to be influenced more significantly by their peers than by you. And it's when that happens that you'll begin to feel the weight of the cultural context that you're living in and the weakness of the church to bolster a strong, vibrant Catholic faith. It really happens when they're teens. Before that, you're not going to get it. Kids are much more adaptable. It's the tender years. They believe in the Easter Bunny. So they're more willing to go along. But it's those teen years and older where the real devastating effects of the wider world around them just pour into their lives.
You mentioned about the resistance that you got from your teenagers when you first made this announcement. You say you got 5 teenagers. Have they all, as a group, come around and said, "Yeah, I like this lifestyle better"? I mean, are there any defectors, or are they all saying, "Yep, you're right, Dad. I mean, this was good"?
No. So I do have a teenager in the late teens who was also here you go. I'll speak in a way that's kind of obscure. That was manifesting the fullness of the world to us back in Seattle. So she was someone who had given herself over to certain ways of living that came from her friends, and it was devastating to us that she was acting in those ways. And so it was like, you know what? She's a sign to us of what's going to happen in other ways, maybe, to other kids of ours. And so when we uprooted, it was kind of like Carrie was like, it's kind of like making pancakes. The first couple kind of don't really come out too good until you get
I've heard that analogy before.
Yeah, so it's like the first couple of kids are kind of under the bus, and then it's really for the sake of the other kids that remain that it's like we need to make this move. So the kids that are the high school age, the junior and sophomore, they're still struggling, but less and less about the fact that they've left behind friends and the school they were in, because they've made such good, healthy friends over here that weight is shifting, and even with that pain that's still there, the restoration, the revival of a freshness to their faith and their life has returned.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The FSSP here we've been going to has an amazingly rich culture as well. And so, my kids are hanging out with friends from the parish, and that's been awesome. I wanted to say this on the program, the radio program. We had a homily about 3 years ago when we weren't members, by a priest who's since moved on. He had health issues. He's moved elsewhere, and he talked about Benedict and Boethius. And it was an amazing homily. He was very erudite. And he said, Boethius basically was a senator. He tried to keep these things going, let's get the next Supreme Court justice. That was his kind of thing. And he affirmed it. The priest was like, that's a good way. But who now is influencing the world? Benedict, not Boethius. Mm-hmm. And so there comes a time where you have to kind of pivot from Boethius to Benedict, it seems. Or let's put it this way, the Boethiuses are keeping the culture going so the barbarians don't overwhelm it, but one day they will.
Yeah. You're talking about Benedict Nursia, right?
Yeah. And Boethius, they lived at the same time.
And he ended up in prison, didn't he, Boethius, and wrote the Consolation of Philosophy?
Yes.
That guy, yeah, okay.
I like to think of it as, is it a Leo moment or a Gregory moment? They're both saints and popes and both great, but one was at a time of the collapse of the Roman Empire, and then the other was this resurgence and this new dynamic aspect of evangelizing Western Europe, right? So are we in a Leo moment or a Gregory moment? And I've spent most of my life in ministry saying this is going to be a Gregory moment. We are going to surge and we're going to go forward. We're going to send an Augustine of Canterbury out and evangelize the Western world. But I'm more of the mindset now that we're in a Pope Leo moment.
Interesting.
That the barbarians have overrun and are going to overrun us, and we need to get into these islands of believers. For me, it's a sadness because, again, my doctoral dissertation was on interreligious dialogue.
Yeah.
I've spent, again, decades helping to foster a sense of the church has a seat at the table, right? So let's dialogue with the world. Let's find common ground. Let's work together. And what I've realized is, it's like, how come I didn't see this before? In so many ways, every time we sit down with the world, the world smiles at us, nods their head, and then they take more ground. More ground, and they give nothing. And so I realized that we're in an Elijah moment. Elijah said, how long will you straddle the issue? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal, follow him. And we don't want to do that. The people did not respond then. And most Catholics want to be able to be comfortably American and say, I can
comfortably
be fully Catholic.
American.
Yeah, that's the title of that should be a title of a book,
Sounds like a song. Like a Pink Floyd song. This is awesome. I'm writing the lyrics today, Tom.
I saw something on Twitter the other day where there's this pro-life lady on Twitter, and she made a comment about the situation in Minneapolis, and it was a good tweet about racism and this and that, and then she posted again and she said, wow, I mentioned racism and I lost a bunch of my followers. And I got to thinking, it's like, well, it's not about how many followers you have. And I think we live in an age where we post something and we want to see how many people like it. We want to see how many people will follow us. And so I think the tendency is to not be just kind of just be nice and to get as many check marks. And I don't know. I guess that's my way of just saying, is there a crisis of courage? And I point to myself as much as anybody when I say that. We blame the bishops and the priests. Are we being courageous?
Well, this comfortable leaving the comfort lifestyle time. I mean, we're going to have sacrifices. I did Exodus, and Dave, you did Exodus 90. And for me, that was fantastic because I just realized I love my American comforts.
Yeah.
Little creature comforts.
Yeah.
And we might have to, in some ways, kind of lose some of those. Clearly going out where you are, there's less opportunities. A typical family's not going to have the same means if they were to do that.
That's right. But you know what? There is the other side, if you take the long road, like that long vision, and you'll realize this. We lived in the Seattle area, and it's like, wait a minute, our kids are going to get married. Are they going to move back here? And if they did, would they be able to buy a house near us?
Right.
The answer was no.
Yeah.
No and probably no. But out here, guess what? It's affordable. And they can actually afford a house.
Yeah.
So guess what? If we're near a powerful community that has many, many big Catholic families, guess what you have? A wonderful pool of potential marriages. And guess where they'll likely live? Here.
Yeah.
And if we can it's going to attract them to go to the right kind of Catholic colleges. It'll attract them to the right kind of Catholic guy. And that couple will be attracted to live in a community that's like ours. So if we want to actually start building something towards the future that can involve our kids, then you'll want to move near communities where it is affordable. Even though it's not going to be as economically prosperous, it can be affordable. And you'll be able to actually foster a sense of generational faith being handed on rather than lost.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I want to bring the birthday girl in the conversation. This is Sissel who called you, Tom, and today's her 22nd birthday. She was homeschooled and really just a good quality person. And so, kind of like Tom being the brightest person in the universe. I'll build you up as well, Sissel.
Oh,
but,
thank you.
Any thoughts about all this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, when we were listening to the show, my sister and I were like nodding along a lot. Like, yes, this is very good. Our parents, I feel like, raised us similarly to this because being homeschooled, they were able to kind of build up our character before we were thrown out into the world a little bit, which was so beneficial. And my mom, from the before we were even teenagers, she saw other kids in our church who became teenagers or went to college and just left the faith entirely. And this is back in when we were Protestant. But she was so concerned about that. And she was like, why is no one else concerned about this? And so she spent a lot of time thinking, what do I need to do for my kids to not have this happen? And a lot of things that you're saying kind of sound similar to what she would say. And, we need to build the family strong together before everyone's kind of sent off. So I really just wanted to say thank you very much for talking about this. It's really great. And I've actually heard of not formally in like the Benedict way, but a lot of people I've heard are moving out and just kind of raising their kids kind of in the country a little bit off, away from everyone, which I don't think is a bad idea. But that's all I really wanted to say.
So I've just two quick comments about things that you've both said. First, Sissel, you're so right on, and we could have a whole other program about how this Benedict option also involves how you educate your kids. So homeschooling, co-ops, charter schools, and now you have the rise of classical Catholic and Christian schools, following these more traditional methods of education, and how that that is drawing together families that are more intentional. Just like the Latin Mass churches, traditional Latin Mass churches, you don't stumble into a parish like that and just say, oh, hey, I'm just going to go here. No, it's a choice. So you have a lot more intentionality, which is going to foster a greater sense of willingness to commit all in. But the second thing is this. So we could talk about the education one. The second is the church right now does not have bishops who are going to address this sufficiently. And the reason is the very thing that makes a priest a good candidate to be a bishop makes him an impotent leader as a bishop.
Hmm.
You want to say that again?
What are those traits? Yeah.
Kind of company
Number
man,
one,
you mean?
They're safe.
Yeah.
They're safe company men. They were brought up and they didn't make waves. They didn't rock the boat. They yesed the bishops in front of them. They were faithful to the bureaucratic environment, the administrative work. Don't make waves. Don't get out of line. And so all of a sudden now they're successful. They use their gifts at the support of the bishop in front of them. Then they become a bishop. And you know what they don't know how to do? They don't know how to lead. They don't know how to stand up. They don't know how to be dynamic and say, I'm going to prophetically address this and take this on. The priests that have those capabilities, they're often shunted off into smaller parishes, or maybe they're sent into difficult circumstances to rescue them, but they almost never become a bishop because the very things that they use their gifts for might make waves in the priest council, might make wave in the presbyteral council, or challenging different policies of dioceses. I know this from all of my friends who are priests, many of my friends who are priests around the country.
Yeah, anecdotally. You know what would be good to have a program where you talk about leadership. What is it to be a good leader?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I would
all of
love
us
to do that.
as fathers, as parents, as teachers, as business worker in the thing, and we want to bring our Catholic faith into these places.
Right. Definitely.
How can we be better leaders?
Yeah, yeah.
And the priests who are listening.
And you do have a guy like Bishop Joseph Strickland, who does break the mold. I mean, he's typically the one that comes out and says things that.
And Bishop Olson has got
the other
opening up
bishop.
the masses. Like we're able to come out to your parish, and that's just fantastic.
Yeah, couple things, Tom. I know we're probably past your time, and so whenever you need to go, you just say, "Hey, I'm done. I got to get out of here," because I know you got the rosary to lead. But I'm wondering about parents who maybe have kids who are older that are listening and are just like, my kids are out of the house. My kids are already, 17, 19. I've totally missed this opportunity to do what Dr. Kern's talking about. What would you say to those parents who are listening and saying, "Oh, I wish my kids were 2 and 4 and 6 again"? What would you say to parents with older kids who maybe have already left or are they're trending in that direction?
Yeah, Dave, it's a great question, and it's something that I wish there was like a magic bullet. Like, okay, say this prayer, do this novena, and your kids will return. And the sadness is that there isn't. It is a great grieving. Like Carrie wept and grieved when we were at that Divine Mercy Sunday Mass a year ago. We grieved what we lost. Like, why didn't we realize this? Why didn't anybody tell us? So I guess I would say a couple of things. Number one, don't give up your hope that the Lord in his providential care has a plan. And the fact that you're coming to hear this and know this right now, trust that the Lord can still move and is still at work. So please become fervent intercessors on behalf of your kids and your grandkids. Second, it's probably a suffering, right? There will be opportunities for you literally to suffer your way into a place of spiritual fruitfulness for your kids. The third is begin to share with them sources of insight and information that might help them step forward into faith or recover their faith. So whether it's like, hey, listen to this program, or recommend this website, or recommend this podcast, it can then wash over them. And then I guess I want to say this, that pass the word on to the next generation. Pass the word on to those parents who are like in our situation. We're still raising the kids, and just say to them, look, I don't want to have what happened to us happen to you. So be a witness to that next generation for them to step up.
Yeah.
That's
Very good.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I got to get out of here.
Okay. Can I ask you one more question? Then I promise we'll let you go.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So a Catholic school principal comes up to you and says, "All right, you're critical of most Catholic schools, and what should I do to transform my Catholic school? What are the steps? Because I like what you're saying, but I got a long road ahead of me. What should I do? What would you say to that person?"
So honestly, it would be to reframe how a Catholic school lives its life. Here's a simple way of saying it. Most Catholic schools are open to the world with the goal of evangelizing the world. Again, salt, light, leaven, meaning we're wide open as a Catholic high school. Come. You'll have your kids apply. We'd love to have them walking the halls. There's an alternative, and that is have a school be less focused on openness and evangelization and rather focused on commitment and discipleship. In other words, our Catholic school is about welcoming in those who are willing to profess this statement of belief, live this set of this way of life, and your kids, if they come here, are going to have this type of standard regarding behavior, regarding how it is that we together are going to live our life as a school. We are going to make disciples in this school. Now, if they do that, you're going to essentially remove so many people who are just sending their kids to the Catholic high school because it's safer than the public school. It's going to give them a degree of protection from the nastiness of the world. It might give them a sense of academic excellence and help prepare them for the future. And you just get a lot of people who are willing to buy their way into that environment for their kids. But they've got no interest or commitment to the faith. And I'll just say this, principal, you will lose. You will lose. You do not have the strength, even if you get good faculty, even if you try to establish rules, if you're open to the world and you just allow half of your students to pour in without a Catholic faith, and the majority of the remaining that are Catholic and they're not living their faith in families that way, there is no way that you're going to be able to have the ability to form a Catholic culture in that high school. It won't happen.
Mm.
That's awesome.
Definitely. Well, Dave had to step away for a moment, Dr. Karam, and I know he promised he would let you go, but thank you so much for being on the after show and the show today with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last word, if you want to see me and pray with me, go to Facebook.com and look up I Love My Catholic Faith, because I'm going to start praying live now, literally with people around the world. They come on and we pray live with people in an interactive way. And this rosary takes about 90 minutes. So for about the next 90 minutes, I'm going to be on praying and ministering with a bunch of other people to those who have needs live online.
Awesome, definitely. And I just linked that on our Facebook page so that they can come and join you there. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
God bless, Tom.
Of course.
Hey, Christopher, great being with you, brother.
Likewise. Take care.
All right, God bless.
All right, Guy. All right, thank you all for joining us for the after show. Dave stepped away for a minute, so hopefully he'll come back in time to say goodbye. Diane, do you have any thoughts on the topics that we talked about today? I have so many thoughts on this whole topic. I love it a lot, but I sometimes can't get my thoughts formulated in time. What have you got to say?
Oh, wow. We had Dr. Tom Karan was a great guest, and we had a lot of heavy topics today.
Yeah, no kidding. Definitely. Had you ever heard of the Benedictine way of that model?
Yes, I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it.
The Benedict Option.
How about you?
Not formally of that particular option. Like I said, I've heard of families. Actually, some of our volunteers during Share-a-thon, I remember one mom telling me that 2 of her kids were getting married, and both of them were deciding to live far out in the country, raise their kids homeschooled, away from social media, away, no phones and stuff like that, which I thought was really interesting. So it is a popular thing that's happening. I hadn't heard formally of the Benedictine option, but...
Is Dr. Curran gone?
Yeah, he's gone.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure I'm not
he's got
ignoring
to go pray
him.
the rosary. Yeah.
All right. And I guess, you may or may not know the answer to this. I was going to ask Dr. Curran if I had another chance for another question, but does the Benedict option doesn't necessarily mean moving out to the country, right?
That's a good question.
Because I know that even here in the big metroplex of Dallas-Fort Worth, there are these small communities, homeschool communities typically, there's a buddy of mine at church who was trying to start an effort. It never really came to fruition of a bunch of families moving into a neighborhood together.
Oh, interesting.
And, even building houses together in the middle of the big city. He wasn't talking about moving out to the country.
Right.
So I don't think it necessarily means
True,
you
moving
physically
to the
have to move away, but I think it typically does mean that.
I think it's definitely more of a lifestyle and who you choose to have a close relationship with and such. I was talking to my sister. It reminds us of a book that we both read called The Awakening of Miss Prim, which was by a Catholic author that I actually found at a Catholic bookstore and I read. And it's about a lady who moves to this community that they have done that. They've moved to their own community. They're self-sufficient. They have their own plants. It's a very interesting book. So, but yeah.
All right. We getting any comments on social media? I'm not
I've been
watching all of
monitoring.
them. I got the guy that texted me during the show about the hands and receiving. I don't know who that was, but he said, please mention that. And I don't, and I did, but I didn't know who it was because he didn't tell me who he was.
Yeah.
But if you are still watching us on the social media platforms and you have a question or a comment about any of the topics, we kind of got very caught up in the Benedict Option, but we also spent the first part of the show talking about a few things like Father McGivney's beatification and also about the news that everybody's talking about now. Like I said, I'm glad we're talking about something other than COVID, but a city being set on fire and
death and
police
riots
precincts
is not a good thing either.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
And again, I think this whole case with George Floyd, there's so many layers of the onion that it's hard to just it's hard to comment on it because there's a lot there. I think almost any decent person would say what happened to George Floyd was really, really awful. I mean, I can't think of a circumstance, let's just say hypothetically, I don't think he did this, but I'm just saying even if he had hit the cop or if he had tried to run away or if he had screamed profanities or if he, if he had a weapon on him, which of course I don't think he did, but I'm just saying just on the surface of it, there's really no excuse for what happened.
And it's interesting because whether it's about racism, whether it's police brutality, whatever it is, I think it just shows that the culture we've lost, seeing the face of Jesus in other people, seeing that seeing that they are a child of God.
Yeah.
And I think,
and typically families of victims like this will come out and say, let's be peaceful. And then, the mayor of Minneapolis said, let's be peaceful. But it's not what typically happens. And then you got the vigilantes who are standing out there in front of the store shops and defending. And I think they have a right to do that. I think if you own a store, the people don't have a right to come in and just destroy your store. I mean, Target is based in Minnesota.
Right.
And so I heard some of the protesters said, well, this is a Minnesota company. Of course, it's national now, but and they support the police, and so we're going to destroy them. And I just think that's a bit of a stretch.
This is a bit of a stretch of reasoning, I think, there for sure. Yeah. Yeah, there are all those people, the stores that are getting looted. They're innocent in this, and so it shouldn't be about that.
Yeah.
Looting has very little to do with protesting a murder of someone. Yeah.
I know our son, when he throws a temper tantrum, sometimes and quite often, in fact, he will go over to something in the house, be it a statue or some electronic or a lamp, and he'll either threaten or he'll destroy it. I mean, he'll throw it to the ground, and it's like his way of saying, I'm mad.
He's like, hey, I just want to make sure you know how mad I am.
Because we have obviously a very strict rule that he doesn't hit us. He can't hit his siblings. So he's like, well, the next best thing is I'm gonna destroy
the lamp.
I guess that's the only bright side is they're generally not killing people. They're not hurting people. So I guess they're thinking, well, the only thing I can do is
make a lot of noise.
A lot of noise and destroy some property, steal a TV, which, as Monsignor Pope said, is really not acceptable. Understandable, but not acceptable. Yeah.
Well, stealing a TV, I still don't get how that relates to, protesting something terrible that happened.
Yeah.
I don't see that's benefiting you. That's not benefiting
it's
the overall culture.
Yeah, it's opportunism.
Yeah, it is.
It's an opportunity. Just I think a lot of these people are not trying to remember the memory of George Floyd, and they're just opportunists.
Oh,
they want to get a free TV, and they see a little breakdown in the social order, and they see an opportunity, and they jump in.
Definitely.
All right. Any other thoughts?
No, that was
Diane? Diane doesn't get to talk much during the show.
Oh no, I think we pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, I mean that's the topic on the Benedict Option. Honestly, like Dr. Malloy said, having a show just simply on leadership, honestly, parenting and how children are raised and stuff like that. I don't think it's talked about enough. Like what Dr. Cran mentioned about, his kids were in a Catholic high school, not to put down Catholic schools, but it's very dangerous for parents to think that their kids are going to be okay, that everything's going to be fine. You still have to be very vigilant with have a relationship in your
Catholic school. Yeah,
it does not mean. I've heard parents say it. They're like, "Oh, my kids will be safe from that." I'm like, "No, they're not. They're not. They're really not. You have no idea who those other kids are.
Yeah,
what they're bringing."
And I think I've even heard principals of Catholic schools say, that there's non-Catholics in the school, and they say that is a good thing. It's almost like, well, these kids are going to be evangelized. There's non-Catholics here, and maybe some of them will. And I think there are a subset of kids that come into a Catholic school, non-Catholic, and leave Catholic or leave predisposed. But then the opposite could happen as well, and they could have any influence on the Catholic kids.
Yeah, and I think it's also very important that even as you're raising your kids to be good Catholics and stuff like that, it is good for them to be exposed to other how people raise their kids otherwise, because sometimes you get to see this is how people live. You to be exposed to it, so how to interact, like talk to those people, and you say, okay, they're not doing quite like this. You can see the differences in your family. It is important, to have that. But yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it. Thanks again. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
And Diane, thanks for the great job on social media. And thanks, everybody, for sticking with us after the show. And to Dr. Tom Curran and Dr. Chris Malloy and Sarah. Sarah was our previous guest who called in.
So sweet that she called in again.
All right. Thanks for calling in, Sarah. All right. Well, that's going to do it. Thanks for sticking with us. And I hope you have a very blessed weekend and a very, very happy celebration of Pentecost. Should have talked about this. Maybe get a cake and then sing happy birthday. Because that's one thing. You're not going to go to your kids and say, hey, how about we get a cake and sing? No, I don't want to do that. That's boring. No, the kids are going to want to do that. And
always
celebrate the birthday of...
An excuse for cake.
And you can also have another cake and celebrate Cecil's
Oh,
birthday.
yeah, definitely. But share some with me, please.
Yes, of course. All right. God bless you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Yeah, some of the